Welcome to What the Wednesday. I'm Sally Balmain with the Northwest Local Land Services Ag Team, and my special guest today is Megan Davies, our district vet. Megan's based in Narrabri. Today we wanted to talk about, or Megan is going to talk about something she's seen in feeding. Tell us a bit about what you're seeing.
So, Sally, at the moment we're seeing an increase in hardware disease. So, hardware disease, it's officially called traumatic reticulopericarditis. And what happens is cattle in particular, when they're grazing or they're eating out of troughs, they pick up little bits of wire. And these can be discarded fencing wire, they can be bits of the actual trough itself, they can be from contaminated hay. Now, what happens to those bits of wire is they settle in the reticulum, which is one of the stomachs. It's the one that's the lowest down and the furthest forward. So the little bits of wire settle in there, and then over time what they'll do is they'll perforate through the reticulum and into the pericardium, which is the muscle surrounding the heart, and they'll cause an infection because obviously you've got then stomach contents moving through into the heart muscle, and those animals will get an infection which will become a septicemia and they'll usually die, and it's often quite a slow and painful death. So hardware disease, it doesn't have to be wire, it can also be screws or any bits of metal that they pick up around the property. So just be really careful with what you're using to feed out in. So old tyres in particular, they start to deteriorate with time, and the old tyres have wire all around the inside, and that wire can break into small pieces, which they can then eat with pellets or hay. So just be really careful with what you're using for feeders to avoid losing cattle to hardware disease.
And I suppose the other thing too is, the string around hay bales and stuff like that.
Yeah, certainly. Look, we find all sorts of interesting things inside cattle rumens. Lots of baling twine and that kind of thing that they pick up when they're feeding, silage wrap. One time I found a bit of radiator hose in a young steer. Particularly young animals, they're very inquisitive and they'll get into anything that you have lying around. So just make sure that they don't have access to areas where they can pick things like that up, particularly farm tips and that kind of thing. They can pick up all sorts of stuff. So be careful with what you're feeding out your feed in, and be careful with where your cattle have access.
Perfect. The other thing I wanted to touch on today, as a lot of us are calving, and then following on from that, we'll be looking at rejoining. So some tips around getting your bulls ready for joining this year, Megan?
Yeah, sure. So look, it's always a good idea to have your bulls checked by an accredited veterinarian. That way they'll check the semen quality, they'll assess the testes and the penis and make sure that's all functional. That's always a really good idea before putting your bulls out in the paddock. And then obviously you need to get them accustomed to the feed that they're going to be on. So what would you recommend there, Sal?
Yeah, so we just, a lot, obviously most people are hand feeding their stock at the moment. Just make sure that if you are using a cereal grain based product, so anything that's starchy to feed your cows, make sure when you put your bulls out with them, it's not going to give them acidosis or something like that. Cottonseed's not as a bigger worry. Some people are funny about feeding cottonseed to bulls. If you don't want to feed cottonseed to bulls, that's fine. If they get someone when they're out with the cows, we're not too worried about that because it doesn't cause any acidotic problems and stuff. But if your cows are on pellets or grain or something like that, please make sure your bulls are accustomed to the same feed before they go in with the cows, just so we don't have any hiccups.
Yep, and just the only other thing is to bear in mind that vitamin A deficiency is a big problem this season. Your cows need vitamin A before they give birth and ideally before they get pregnant. Bulls need a vitamin A injection as well so they can do their job well. So vitamin A injections, if you haven't had green feed for the last 6 months, consider that in your pre-joining plan.
Perfect. And as always, if you'd like any more information or you'd like some help tailored to your farm, please just reach out to your closest office and be put in touch with either someone from the vet team or someone from the ag team. Thanks very much. And if you're at AgQuip next week, we'll see you there.